Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Satashishiman Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Satashishiman Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vrajangs Tishtan Padaikena. Vrajangs Tishtan Padaikena. Yatai Vaikena Gachati Yatatrina Jalokaivam Dehi Karmagatim Gataha Vrajangs Tishtan Padaikena Yatai Vaikena Gachati Yatatrina Jalokaivam Dehi Karmagatim Gataha Vrajangs Tishtan Padaikena Yatai Vaikena Gachati Yatatrina Jalokaivam Dehi Karmagatim Gataha Rajangstishtam Padarkinam. Vaishnavis. Ishtam Padarkinam. Padarkinam. Ishtam Padarkinam. Vrajan, a person while traveling on the road. Tishtan, while standing. Pada ekena, on one foot. Yata, as. Eva, indeed. Ekena, by another foot. Gachati, goes. Yata, as. Trunajaloka, a worm on a vegetable. Evam, in this way. Dehi, the living entity. Karmagatim, the reactions of fruitive activities. Gataha, undergoes. Translation. Just as a person traveling on the road rests one foot on the ground and then lifts the other, or as a worm on a vegetable transfers itself to one leaf and then gives up the previous one, the conditioned soul takes shelter of another body and then gives up the one he had before. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. This is the process of the soul's transmigration from one body to another. At the time of death, according to his mental condition, the living being is carried by the subtle body consisting of mind, intelligence, and ego to another gross body. When higher authorities have decided what kind of gross body the living entity will have, he is forced to enter such a body, and thus he automatically gives up his previous body. Dull-minded persons who do not have the intelligence to understand this process of transmigration take for granted that when the gross body is finished, one's life is finished forever. Such persons have no brains with which to understand the process of transmigration. At the present moment, there's great opposition to the Hare Krishna movement, which is being called a brainwashing movement. But actually, the so-called scientists, philosophers, and other leaders in the Western countries have no brains at all. The Hare Krishna movement is trying to elevate such foolish persons by enlightening their intelligence so that they will take advantage of the human body. Unfortunately, because of gross ignorance, they regard the Hare Krishna movement as a brainwashing movement. They do not know that without God consciousness, one is forced to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Because of their devilish brains, they will next be forced to accept an abominable life and practically never be able to liberate themselves from the conditional life of material existence. How this transmigration of the soul takes place is very clearly explained in this verse. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Before starting, I first ask for the blessings of the senior Vaishnavas that I may speak appropriately on our Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta as handed down to us by our Srila Prabhupada. So today we are continuing with the pastime of Kamsa taking Devaki and Vasudeva on a chariot, and during their marriage procession, voice in the sky stated that Kamsa would be killed by the 8th son of Devaki. And so Kamsa has taken up a sword and was going to kill Devaki right there on her wedding day. And Vasudeva, seeing the situation, he was trying to do anything and try to preach to Kamsa about the situation of how everybody is going to have to die. In today's verse, he gives the process of the soul's transmigration from one body to another. Just as a person traveling on the road rests one foot on the ground and then lifts the other, or as a worm on a vegetable transfers itself to one leaf and then gives up the previous one. So this body will die and the soul will take on another body, being carried by the subtle body. The living being is apareyam itastvanyam prakritim vidime param. It is the energy of Krishna. There is the gross energy of Krishna, which consists of bhumir aponulo vayu kamano budhir evacha ahankara, the earth, water, fire, air, ether, false ego, mind, intelligence, as the bhina prakritir ashtara, the material elements, the material energy of Krishna. And the soul, vidime prakritam, is the transcendental energy. The living entity is marginal potency. Originally, the soul is connected with Krishna, but turning away from Krishna, wanting to enjoy separately from Krishna, one has entered into the material consciousness or material world. And we understand that Maya, she has two special potencies to keep the jiva enslaved or bound in this world. There's the prakshep atmaka and the avaranatmaka Maya. So the prakshep atmaka Maya, it binds one to the body and the senses, makes one identify with this body. And the avaranatmaka Maya, the potency of Maya, it ties us to the mind and gives us a sense of pleasure from sense gratification, gives us a sense of happiness. So this is the conditioned soul's calamity, is that they're bound by Maya Devi in this material world, thinking that they're the body, thinking that we're the mind. And so we have the stula sharira, which is the gross body, and we have the linga sharira, the subtle body. And the subtle body, which is mind, intelligence, and ego, false ego, carries the living entity from body to body to body after death. So we often give the example that this gross body is like clothes. So the mind, intelligence, and false ego is like the underwear. if we can think like that, because it's very hard for us to understand that we're not the mind. 25% of Americans believe in reincarnation. They actually have some understanding that we're not the body. And we can probably understand that this is due to the preaching of Krishna consciousness and handing out so many transcendental literatures that people, even they say that 20% of Christians believe in reincarnation nowadays. So 25% of Americans believe in transmigration of the soul. But it's very hard to understand that we're not the mind. We can have some understanding that we're not this body, but to really understand that we're not the mind, sankalpa, vikalpa, the mind is accepting and rejecting. And, you know, sometimes we think that the soul is the mind or the mind is the soul. But even we'll have to give up the subtle body to transcend. And so we understand that this is avidya. Maya Devi, using these two potencies, is keeping the living entity in avidya, or keeping them out of knowledge. But real knowledge is vidya vinaya sampane brahmane gavi hastani shuni chaiva shvapake cha pandita samadarshanaha. That the living entity is actually the soul, in whatever body they're taking on. Actually, everybody is the same spirit soul, the eternal servant of Krishna. But in this day and age, and especially in the society, there's not a lot of talk about death, about giving up the body. Right? What to speak of even talking about how we're spirit souls, or talking about real education, because understanding that we're spirit souls, vidya vinaya sampane, this is vidya, this is real education. But there's no education system implemented in the universities, primary schools, high schools, that is teaching about the soul. And the powers that be actually don't even want us thinking that we're spirit souls. They want to keep us as workers, basically. When you look at the modern day education system, which Srila Prabhupada referred to as a slaughterhouse, we have a lot of scholars and even persons who have studied education reform. They say that modern day schools are no different than modern day factories. And you look at how the cafeteria, the bells, everything that is used in the modern day education, it's exactly like being put through a factory. And the powers that be do not want people to become scholars, poets, philosophers, what to speak of spiritualists in this day and age. We just need workers. Just, you know, go to school and go to college so that you can get a business degree and then go work. Even when we think about people who are using, going to school for computers, you know, some people think that that's a very intelligent job, going to computers, but actually computer software programmers and anybody who's working on computers, they're like the modern day mechanics. You know, it's still considered Sudra in Vedic culture. But when we look back in 1800s, even early 1900s, of what going to college, what going to the university actually meant, it was something very different than what is today. And even now, kind of the big joke is that even going to college doesn't necessarily get you a job today. You can go to college and there's people that have degrees and even PhDs that can't find work. So what to speak of talking about the soul, what to speak of talking about spiritualism, we're living in what Cornel West calls a Disneyland society. Basically, we don't talk about death at all. We hide death, right? Disneyland society means everybody lives happily ever after. It's a beautiful life. Let's hide the suffering. Let's hide the death. We don't want to talk about it. And raising a daughter in Krishna consciousness movement from her birth, we've been reading Srila Prabhupada's books to her, emphasizing the philosophy. And sometimes in Srila Prabhupada's books, it talks about how we're not the body and we're going to die. Even to little children, 5 years old, Srila Prabhupada wanted this knowledge to be given to them. But other people, they have a different view on that, about how we shouldn't talk to death about children, which is very weird, because when you look at other societies that are not so Western, death is just a natural part of life. They talk about it, they accept it. Whereas in our Western civilization, we hide death. We don't want to talk about death because mostly we're afraid. We're afraid that everything that we're working for, everything that we're doing is going to be taken away. And we don't want to face that these bodies are going to have to be given up. I remember when I was 6 years old, my grandfather passed away. And I remember going to the funeral and I had no idea what was really going on. You know, as a child looking back, I was so confused. You know, here's my grandfather, they made up his body, and, you know, certain people are crying. And I was attached to my grandfather because he always used to give me the best toys. You know, that was my relationship with him. He was spoiling me. And so then I found that my grandfather's gone. He's not here anymore. But what does that mean to a little child when nobody wanted to talk about it? Nobody wanted to give me real knowledge, a real education on what death is. Oh, he's just gone. He just passed away. But who is he? You know, the body's there. And then even growing up, you know, living in South Dakota, kids do crazy, stupid stuff in the country. And I remember friends that passed away because there was a road called Spook Road, and it was this windy, turny road, and certain friends, and even I was one of them, sorry to say that, we would try and drive our car as fast as possible, you know, through this winding road, you know, death-defying teenagers. And I saw friends had passed away, and I thought, why do we have to die? What is the meaning of life? But Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya paritachetasam vyavasatmika buddhi samadha navidiyate, that because we're engrossed in this bhoga and aishvarya, these opulences, aishvarya, and bhoga, sense gratification, we see that people are dying, we see that suffering is happening, but then we're just covered over by this avaranatmika, this prakshepatmika, let me enjoy, or oh, let me play this video game, give me some sense gratification, get my mind off of things. You know, it keeps us from asking the big questions of life, of who we are, what are we doing here? And so, even Srila Prabhupada in this purport, he gets very heavy with people who say that there's no transmigration at all. He says people have no brains with which to understand the process of transmigration. They're dull-minded. And as Sriman Brigupati Prabhu was saying yesterday, that there are people that do accept reincarnation even in the scientific community, but it's not the end. We need to go further. So the so-called scientists, philosophers, and other leaders in the Western countries have no brains at all, and they try to say that the Hare Krishna movement is brainwashing young people, brainwashing people to believe in something that's not real. But Srila Prabhupada addressed this one point, that brainwashing, it actually means that what we're doing is we're taking the brain out, washing it very nicely of the contamination and putting it back in. We're actually brainwashing, washing the brain, cheto darpana marjanam, cleansing the mirror of the heart. And so Raja Vidya Rajaguyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshavagam Dharmyam Susukam Kartum Avyayam, that this is the king of all knowledge, Raja Vidya, Rajaguyam, it's the secret of all secrets, right? And it gives direct perception of the self, and that's why it is the greatest religion. It gives direct perception of the self. So when we properly understand who we are, then we can try to understand what our relationship with Krishna is, because Jiver Srupahoy Krishna Nityadas, we are the eternal servants of Krishna. So it's not that we're just sitting around going, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, I'm not this body, I'm not this mind, just sitting there trying to think ourselves that we're not this body. But actually, it's a very practical system of understanding that we're not this body. We're not just theoretically trying to understand that we're not this body, but we're trying to engage this body in the service of Krishna. Sarvo padivanir muktam tat padatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikena sevanam bhaktir uchate. By engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses become purified. We become free from all these false designations. I am this body, I am this mind, I connect with this group of people, with this country, with this sports team, with this television show. I connect with all these different things. But actually these are all upadis. These are all designations that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime have been piled up. And so this is very practical by engaging in devotional service. Engaging in devotional service, we get a very practical experience, chanting Hare Krishna, engaging that we're actually engaging in processes that the soul is naturally supposed to be engaged in. The soul is eternal servant of Krishna. And so with this material body, we're engaging in the service of Krishna. We're using it to transcend, using the best use of a bad bargain. And in Srimad Bhagavatam in the scriptures, we get so many different examples of how to use the body in the service of Krishna. Of course, the greatest example is Ambarish Maharaj. He used all of his senses, he used all of his opulences. Even though he was a king, he was completely immersed in God consciousness. And we see that he was even in the face of Durvasa Muni, who was going to kill Ambarish Maharaj, he surrendered to Krishna. Whereas Durvasa Muni, he's a great yogi. He should have Brahma Vidya, he should have knowledge, he should have gyan about how he's not the body. When the Sudarshan Chakra came after him, he didn't pray, he didn't surrender, he didn't try to submit himself to the Lord, but rather he thought, I need to save myself. And so he ran from demigod to demigod, Lord Shiva, even went to Vishnu, trying to save himself rather than surrendering to Krishna. So Ambarish Maharaj, he used his body, he used everything in Krishna's service. And we see another very extreme example in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam of one using their body in the service for others. Right? Dadichi, he was a great rishi. He was known as being a great devotee of Lord Shiva. And so he had vast, vast knowledge. Even it's stated, Srila Prabhupada in the purport states that Dadichi, he had so much material knowledge and so much spiritual knowledge. So much spiritual knowledge, Brahma Vidya, that the Ashvini Kumars, they wanted to learn the science of Brahma Vidya from him, the knowledge of self-realization. But Indra, Lord Indra, he came to Dadichi and he said that the Ashvini Kumars, they're physicians. They're the doctors of the demigods. Don't give them this Brahma Vidya, otherwise you will be punished. So the Ashvini Kumars, they went to Dadichi and they begged him, please, please teach us about the science of the soul, about the science of God consciousness. And Dadichi, he said that, I can't, otherwise I will be punished by Lord Indra. And they said, don't worry, what we'll do is we're going to cut off your head, put a horse head on your body, and you can speak Brahma Vidya through the horse's head. And then when Indra comes and he cuts your head off, punishes you, cuts your head off, then we'll put your original head on your body. So even what to speak of surgeons today, or plastic surgery, anything like that, just think of what the demigods could do, the Ashvini Kumars. And so he spoke Brahma Vidya to the Ashvini Kumars, and Lord Indra cut off his head and then put his head back on. So Dadichi, he was such a great soul. And at a particular history of Srimad Bhagavatam in the 6th canto, we read that Indra, he was cursed, and because the demigods, they had taken shelter of Vishvarup. They had taken shelter of Vishvarup as their spiritual master, and Lord Indra had killed his guru, Vishvarup. He cut off the heads of Vishvarup, and Vishvarup's father was so angered that he performed a yagya that would produce a demon that would kill Lord Indra. And this Vritrasura, he came out and he was going to destroy everything. He was giant. The demigods didn't know what to do. So Lord Indra and the demigods, they started praying to the Supreme Lord, to Vishnu. And by pleasing the Lord with prayers, Lord Vishnu came personally and said, this is what you should do. Go to Dadichi. He's a very great soul. And what you should do is you should ask for his body. He will give you his body, and from his body, Vishvakarma will create a thunderbolt that you'll be able to kill Vitrasura with. So the demigods, they went to Dadichi, and they started saying to Dadichi, Dadichi, please give up your body to us so that we can kill Vitrasura. Now Dadichi, he's a great rishi, and he's a devotee of the Lord. And a devotee of the Lord wants to use whatever they can to help others in Krishna consciousness. So Dadichi, before giving up his body, he actually said to the demigods, my body, it's very dear to me. Why would I just want to give it up to you? So the demigods, they start preaching, kind of in the same way as Vasudeva is preaching to Kamsa, that, oh, everybody has to live, everybody has to die, transmigration of the soul. They start preaching to him that you're not your body anyway, and the body is actually meant for others. You know, you should be willing to give up your body to help us in living our lives, basically. And so Dadichi, he surrenders. He gives up his body, and they create a thunderbolt out of his body, out of his bones, and they kill Vritrasura. Now this is a very extreme example of somebody just giving up their body for the service of others. But we understand that through Srila Prabhupada's books and Srila Prabhupada's teachings, that this body is meant to preach Krishna consciousness, which is the greatest welfare work for others. This body is meant to serve others by giving others Krishna consciousness. Just as Dadichi easily gave up his body because he had vidya, he had knowledge that he's not his body, he's actually spirit soul. And so even if they take my body, he knows that this is not me. I am not this body, I'm spirit soul. We have so many examples of Srimad Bhagavatam, in Srimad Bhagavatam, of great souls who show us how to die properly. And Srimad Bhagavatam is based on Parikshit Maharaj asking Shukadev Goswami questions, and Parikshit Maharaj, he was cursed to die in 7 days. And yet he was a king, he was a great king, the king of the whole world. And yet he understood, because he was a great devotee, that at the end of life, the duty of this life is to serve Krishna, is to hear about Krishna, is to help others in Krishna consciousness. And so he's giving us a perfect example of what to do with our lives. Throughout Bhagavatam, there's many examples, and even in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we read about Srila Haridas Thakur. Srila Haridas Thakur was the Namacharya. He was spreading the holy name throughout the whole land, being empowered by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in the Antya-lila of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, we read about Haridas Thakur's passing away, which is very glorious. It's very sad also, but it's very glorious because he's showing us how to leave this world. We read that Govinda Das, the servant of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he went one day to give the remnants of the Lord to Haridas Thakur. And so when he went to see Haridas Thakur, Haridas Thakur was laying down and very slowly chanting Hare Krishna. And Govinda Das, he said to Haridas Thakur, Haridas Thakur, is everything okay? And Haridas Thakur replied, my body is okay, but my mind is not well. I'm not able to finish my rounds. And so he said that, well, I've brought remnants from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprasad for you. And he said, I have not finished my rounds, and yet you're bringing Mahaprasad. And so we see that at this point, Haridas Thakur was so elderly, and he was on the verge of giving up his body, but he was still so concerned with finishing his rounds, chanting his japa, even so much that they were bringing Mahaprasad for him, and he didn't want to stop chanting the holy name, even though his body is about to give up. And so he took a little piece of the Mahaprasad and continued chanting. The next day, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself came, and he saw the condition that Haridas Thakur was in. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, Krishna, as Lord Chaitanya, came and said to Haridas Thakur, you're old. You've preached the holy name, you're Namacharya. You don't have to finish your rounds anymore. Just be peaceful. But Haridas Thakur, he made such a strict vow to always chant his rounds, to chant the holy names. And so he begged Lord Chaitanya that I know that you're going to give up your pastime soon. So please allow me to first go away before you do. I don't want to see your pastimes end. I want to leave my body with your feet on my chest and my eyes looking at your moon-like face. And so Haridas Thakur, he was giving us the example that this whole life is meant for preaching Krishna consciousness, this one life that we have. And the perfection of death is to be chanting the holy names and seeing the Lord. And we understand that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so pleased with Haridas Thakur that at the time of Haridas Thakur's passing, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was literally dancing with Haridas Thakur's body. And they had a big celebration. And our own Srila Prabhupada showed us how to die properly, how to give up this material body. Even though we understand that Srila Prabhupada's body is completely spiritual, he enacted the pastime of disappearing so that we could serve him in this way. And also, he gives the example of leaving the body. And till his last breath, he was preaching Krishna consciousness. He was emanating Krishna consciousness. And even we see with disciples of Srila Prabhupada, for instance, His Holiness Bhaktitirtha Maharaj, he was suffering so much. My Guru Maharaj talks about how he was suffering so much, but still he would always chant his rounds, following in the footsteps of Haridas Thakur. His body was in such pain that no painkillers would even help his body, even give him some kind of comfort. But still, he would always continue to chant his rounds. Even if it was late at night, he would still chant his rounds. Even my Guru Maharaj talks about how they would talk about Krishna conscious philosophy, talk about Srila Prabhupada, and then Bhaktitirtha Swami would look at him and say, okay, now I have to finish my rounds, even though he was barely able to move. This is a great example for us. And what to speak of great personalities, even it was revealed that George Harrison, when he was at the last stages of death, he was on painkillers and morphine because of the cancer. But when he knew it was really time to give up his body, he actually gave up all the medication. He actually got off all of the morphine, all the pain medication, because he said that he wanted to really experience death. And by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, he did a lot of great service, that he was able to experience death and in the association of Vaishnavas. So we have all these great examples, and it's very difficult for us to understand that we're not this body, and even more difficult to understand that we're not the mind. But we have a practical solution to engage practically in devotional service, and by engaging in devotional service, then we can have some realization that we're not this body, that we're not this mind. We're the eternal servants of Krishna. And we can try to serve Guru, Gauranga, Radha Krishna. We can try and serve the Vaishnavas and spread Krishna consciousness with this body and give this one lifetime to Srila Prabhupada and his mission. I'll stop there if anybody has any comments or questions. Bal Gopal Prabhu. If you like, yeah. It'd be better for those on the internet so they can hear your divine realizations.
Yeah, thank you. Nice class. You did a good job of explaining everything. Just as far as Prabhupada went, I just wanted to add that Prabhupada, clearly, he was almost like a personification of somebody giving up their body for the benefit of others. Because it's like Prabhupada was, for years, he was choosing to give up his body. In other words, he way back, even before he came to America practically, he was confronted with choices. Okay, if I do this, this will be good for my health. But if I do that, it'll be good for the Krishna consciousness movement. And, we just, by reading the story of Prabhupada, hearing, he always chose, let me do what's good for this Krishna consciousness movement. There's probably dozens of examples of, instances where that devotees are aware of when Prabhupada made that choice. Well, doing this would be good for the health, but I got to do this. Like one vivid one that comes to my mind is when he was in New York, 1976, and he was ill. And the devotees were trying to tell him, Prabhupada, don't travel. He was supposed to be traveling to Tehran or Iran in the next day or something like that. So they were saying to Prabhupada, no, just stay here for a while. Just relax. And then Prabhupada he actually got upset. I can't remember the exact words. Sura would remember the exact words because I've heard him mentioned in class a bunch of times. But Prabhupada said, I want and he actually got irritated with everything. Look, just give me the right to die, go down preaching like Arjuna. I can't remember the exact words he said. Sura would remember. But, he made that point clear that I'm doing what's good for the Krishna consciousness movement. I'm going to do what's good for preaching Krishna consciousness. And even despite the fact that I know it's not good for my health. And he just made that choice repeatedly. And as I said, that's one example, but there's so many examples of that. So Prabhupada's almost like a personification of somebody who gave up his life, gave up his body for the benefit of others.
Sure.
I'm going to add that.
Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki.